This country of Myanmar in Southeast Asia, which this year alone has seen itself get hit by three excruciating E's: economic uncertainty, an earthquake, and an enduring conflict between the junta rebel groups and various ethnic separatist groups, including that of the Kachin Independence Army. Now, this brings us to a town called Bamo in the Kachin state, actually, and this time around, China has asked the KIA, or the Independence Army, to back off and to cease its efforts to control this very important logistics town, or else they will stop importing rare earths from the Kachin-controlled state, actually. Now, this highlights just how important the state is, and as I wait for this map to actually come up, you'll see why it's important. You'll see the town of Bamo here is seen as a logistics hub, actually, for many of the rare earths that come from Myanmar and are exported to China. And because of that, making sure that this is secure is paramount, not just for Myanmar and the rare earths industry, but also for China, which actually has been importing a lot of heavy rare earths, including terbium and dysprosium, from these mines that go through the town of Bamo. Now, this also really just highlights how two things. One, how deep the rare earths trade has actually gotten between Myanmar and China, especially over the last 8 to 9 years, but also highlights just how dominant, how strong China has become in the rare earths industry, and calling them influential it might be a bit of an understatement. I think Elaine will probably do a better job of actually explaining how China became so dominant and why that leverage, Elaine, might actually be a little bit more homegrown, actually, in terms of where the power is coming from, Elaine.
Yeah, and it's a homegrown advantage for sure. And when we talk about dominance, China dominating the sector, we're really talking about the entire supply chain. So China is home to nearly half of the world's reserves, and that's more than the next 6 countries combined after. And it also mines 2/3 of global supplies. And then China processes almost all of it. So that's thanks to decades of targeted investments, industrial policy, and also lax environmental rules. And former Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping once said, the Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. And moving downstream too, China has used this cheap and steady supply to scale up production of rare earth magnets, which are critical components for so many things that power the global economy. So China is the undisputed leader in rare earths, and it has paid a high price environmentally. And in the last decade, we've seen China shifting its strategy a bit. It has cracked down on illegal mining and imposed stricter environmental requirements. And it has, during this period, significantly increased imports from Myanmar, particularly heavy rare earth elements, which are less abundant. And now China's getting mixed up in the conflict, JP.
Yeah, and this is one thing we'll have to also note, why Myanmar is so important to China. But there is an argument, Elaine, that Myanmar might need this trade more than China actually does. To put it simply, Myanmar is cash-strapped. And whether you're a junta or whether you're one of the ethnic rebel groups that controls some of these mines, you need to generate cash. So you need to sell some of these rare earths. In fact, they estimate that the export of rare earths to China in 2023 from Myanmar hit about $1.4 billion. And that's a lot of important coin, regardless of which side of the conflict you actually find yourself on. Now, it's also important to note that China's threat, actually, to stop importing rare earths from Myanmar might hurt them on the short term with regards to supply chain, but there is an argument that this might actually be something that China can actually do and back up. Because as you mentioned a while ago, China has the biggest amount of rare earth reserves in the entire world, as you mentioned, bigger than the next 7 countries combined. Now, we don't have a strong breakdown or a concrete breakdown of the 17 rare earths and where the big concentrations are, but based on some reports we've seen, most if not all of these, including terbium and dysprosium, actually are in China. So it is possible for China to actually go into the markets and say, hey, you know what, we can open up these mines, take the short-term pain, but we can start opening up our mines and look inward once again. And thus you can start to see, Elaine, that maybe Myanmar and other countries in the world might actually be on the short end of this and might need this trade more than China, also highlighting that China's dominant, that is, in the reserves, in the production, and the processing. So it's a triple threat, actually, when you take a look at China's presence and influence in this area, isn't it?
Yes, and this is a really interesting dynamic between China and Myanmar, this sort of mutual dependency, but also tension. And China does want imports, sure, from Myanmar, particularly these heavy rare earth elements, right? But because of its dominance, it has leverage, and it has been wielding this leverage globally in trade talks. And we see countries trying to do something about this, trying to lessen their reliance on China's rare earth sector. So the DoD's direct stake in MP materials, Apple investing $500 million in MP materials, and the EU and Japan considering joint partnerships, private-public partnerships, to reduce that reliance. And in June, though, China's exports of rare earths surged 60%, and that's after the trade truce. And so that could be stockpiling, but could also show how hard it is to shake this dependence.